Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence podcast. It is a great pleasure to have Tatyana Mamut with me today. Tatyana and I met at an AI dinner that I put on in San Francisco, and we ended up sitting across from each other, got into this deep conversation about the future of AI, the agentic world that we're all going to be living in all these different elements. And then I realized Tatyana also has this insanely impressive background working in a variety of top-tier companies, leading massive teams, helping take a company public, being on their board of directors, just kind of doing all of those things. And I was like, I need to have a deeper conversation with Tatyana, on top of which, of course, she is doing her own startup, Wayfound, now. And so talking through what does all this mean? Why did she go from being starting a bunch of consulting firms early on, including with her dad, in her first really early parts of her career, going in-house as an entrepreneur, building amazing teams at top-tier companies, and then going kind of full circle and doing a tech startup in the AI space. So Tatyana, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Excellent. So one of the first questions I like to ask people right off the bat, and you've seen so many different entrepreneurs, internally, externally, as an investor, you name it. How do you define entrepreneurial excellence? Like what is excellence in your mind and when you define that?
So the biggest thing that I think makes for a great entrepreneur is an entrepreneur who is really driven. And what it takes to be really driven, I think, is to have a really good sense of the future. A lot of people talk about conviction. Certainly investors are looking for conviction, and I think that that's right. So a really great entrepreneur starts with someone who has just incredible belief in a particular future that they see differently than other people see. And they can see not just the vision of the future of what it should look like, but they actually see the path. They see the steps to get to that future, right? Because the difference between the wishful thinking and actually creating something great is that you see the steps to get to that place, and then you know how to execute them.
Is that then the biggest difference in a sense? Like, anyone listening to this is either an entrepreneur already or wants to be an entrepreneur. And most people have this belief that they are that person, right? They're like, I'm crazy enough to believe that I am that founder who can see the future. But let's be honest, 98% of us are completely wrong. So what is that 2% difference of people who actually truly can see the future or have a strong enough will to make that future a reality?
Sequencing is the hardest thing about this whole thing. Okay. So having a vision of the future, having a prognostication or a prediction about what's going to happen is actually pretty easy. And, being easy, whatever, 50% or 60%, or it's pretty easy to be about 50 or 60% right, which is kind of what you need in order to then be able to pivot your way to that place. But the sequencing is really hard. What's the first step I take? Then what's the second step? Then what's the third step? And getting that sequence both right and being able to meet the world where it is at the right place, at the right time, with the right product and the right people, that's actually the hard part.
So do you have any secrets of how you've seen that happen? Like you sort of went through, I guess, parts of those sequences. Are there like people that have done it really well or examples where like, this is the step that I would follow, like even the step that you're following at Wayfound? Like what is that sequence that people could at least attempt to emulate? And how do you do that in a world where you have imperfect knowledge? Even if you believe this can be the future is constantly catching up to reality. And then that reality is changing what you know about the future. Yeah. So how do you constantly deal with that influx of new information and pivot a bit, but not so far that you're constantly swerving?
Sure. So I worked at Salesforce and at Amazon. And so, of course, two great entrepreneurs of our time started those companies, right? Mark Benioff. And so Mark Benioff had a vision of how the future should work, how software should work in the future based on a cloud-based computing model, but the world wasn't there yet. And so step one was to get the world on board with understanding that you could trust, right? This new computing model. So again, the hard part is figuring out then what is the sequence of steps that you need to take to start to get the world to believe that, to start to get customers to actually buy into that, like both figuratively and literally. And one of the really crazy things he did was he ran around with a no software sign, with this thing called Sassy all over San Francisco to tell the story. Was that crazy? It probably seemed totally crazy at the time, but in retrospect, it was a really critical, first step, or one of the first steps that he made, right, in doing that.
I will add, by the way, that marketing move by him is one that I cite a ton of times when I think through how to build a brand. Obviously, it's in a bunch of books too. I didn't just get this out of the blue, my idea, but it really is one of these great steps where it's like, I'm going to plant a flag in the ground and say, this is the future, and put it in people's faces in a kind of annoying way. And to his credit, he said, you know what, I'm going to do this because I believe it and see the future. And obviously he was totally right. And frankly, his product, Salesforce, became the default CRM in the world.
Right.
Because of it.
Right. Exactly. So again, that series of steps, that's the hard thing. Like, what is the tactical things that I need to do to get there, and to have me lead the way and be the company, right, that people adopt as the future emerges? Because when you are building something for an emergent future, which Amazon did as well, and what we're doing at Wayfound as well with AI agents, you are constantly trying to figure out what is the next tactical move, what is the next tactical step, right, to meet the future, to meet the world where it is, and take it one step forward with us leading the way, right? And Mark Benioff, back to Mark for a second, and then I'll switch to Amazon. Mark had this great thing where he said, our job is to meet customers in the future and give them a warm handshake. Help customers get to the future, but make them feel like we're there waiting for them with a warm handshake.
So is it sort of implying then you don't want to scare customers, because most customers are not ready for that future. So you need to sort of gently guide them to it. And of course, when you guide them there, the solution waiting in front of them will be your product.
Exactly. And by the way, this is not something that you can learn by emulating what Mark Benioff did, or emulating what Jeff Bezos did, or emulating what anybody else did, because the world is constantly changing. The future is always unknown. And so the step that worked 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 2 years ago is probably not going to work today. And so the ultimate creative exercise for the entrepreneur is daily. It's a daily creative exercise to understand what is the micro step, what is the tactical move I make today, right, to get us one step forward, and then another step forward. It's a daily creative exercise.
So how do you, given your experience at all these big companies, including at IDEO, where I know you helped build a ton of stuff, sort of like organizational change, how do you make sure as a founder that you are making those sort of micro adjustments in real time without completely changing up your strategy? Because I meet many founders who have a little bit of shiny object syndrome, and they see some new piece of data and like, I'm going to go in that direction, I'm going to go in this direction. What did the best founders and entrepreneurs you've worked with, how did they either avoid that, or maybe say, you know what, like, I've heard enough information, we are going to make a bit of a hard pivot and we just need to?
Yeah. Well, let me talk a little bit Amazon and what I think, made that company great in terms of sticking to its core idea, which was, by the way, A to Z, everything, right? But the first step was books, right? The first step was books. And what I saw there was an incredible, and Jeff Bezos was all about mechanisms, right? Creating mechanisms in order to drive the company forward. So you figure out what is the outcome that you need in the short term. You kind of figure out the dynamic of the system that is leading to the current outcomes that are suboptimal in some way. And then you work backwards and say, what is the one thing that I can adjust now to get me to the outcome that I want, assuming that there is a feedback loop, that it happens again and again and again. And so it can either lead to unintended outcomes in the second and third order consequences, or it can actually start to kind of have a positive feedback loop, right? Where you get growth in the outcome that you want. So that type of thinking of like, what is the intervention that I can make given that I want outcomes that are different than what I have today? And then how do I think about how that plays out over 3 weeks, over 5 weeks, after 6 weeks? And that type of thinking of like, are we on the right path right now? Because if I keep magnifying the outcomes that I'm getting right now, where does that take me? Does that take me to my desired outcome? And at that point, as an entrepreneur, as the CEO, if your answer is no, then you need to shift something.
Yep.
If the outcomes that we're getting today are magnified, is that going to take me where I want to go? And if the answer is no, then and if the answer is no, you have to change something, right? In your system, in your process, you have to make a different tactical move.
How did founders then, or how do you make sure, even at Amazon, the level of discipline I feel like you need to have to make sure you can track or remember back to, I made that micro change 6 weeks ago and it's led to these outcomes, is a level of discipline that I don't know if I could claim that I have. So how did they manage it at Amazon?
I don't know. I don't know how early on they managed it at Amazon. I assume Jeff just had it in his head.
He just
right?
could remember everything. He's just that brilliant.
Well, not just, you don't remember everything, but you do remember, like, I adjusted the way, and I do this right now as an entrepreneur. I adjust the way that I talk about the product, and I see the types of customers that I attract, and I see the types of outcomes that I get in terms of moving to a POC. Yep. And I will do it for a week, right? I'll talk about the product in one way for a week, and then I'll see what happens. And then I adjust based on that outcome, right? I'm like, okay, that didn't work. I was trying HR for AI agents for a little while, and I did not get the outcomes that I wanted. So again, I went back and I adjusted. And then, so every intervention that you make, you have to really understand that way of speaking about your product, that way of demoing, like, how do I start my product demo? Do I start it here or do I start it here, right? We have a builder, we have a manager. Do I start it in the builder? Do I start it in the manager? And then what kind of outcomes do I get? Right? And then you adjust that. It's every decision like that, you have to keep in a model in your mind that your business is a machine, and the way that you adjust the pieces of the machine are leading to different outcomes. And if that's not the outcome that you want, then you need to figure out which part of the machine do you need to jigger with. And then you see, am I getting more of the outcomes that I want or fewer of the outcomes that I want? You just keep doing it again and again and again and again and again. Those
are great examples, and definitely ones that I do all the time as an entrepreneur. It's funny though, do you find that maybe going back to entrepreneurial excellence is another key part of excellence, the ability to be like creativity? In other words, I find a lot of people are not all that creative, actually. And in fact, the idea of change scares them in many cases. Whereas for me, touting my own self, like, I love change. I want to embrace change every single day. And I'm always thinking about new ways we can improve, new tests we can run, new things we want to try. I don't know if that's normal with great entrepreneurs, or it's just me, or what have you seen?
I think it's normal with great entrepreneurs. I don't think it's normal with entrepreneurs. So, and it's because it's not normal with humans. And many humans, so here's what I would say. I would say that great entrepreneurs are very creative and extremely empirical. Okay.
Meaning they're using data to make that decision, or?
Yes. Meaning that they're using data to judge whether their creative output is good or bad. Okay. They're not ideological. Just because you have a vision of the world doesn't mean that you say, well, other people don't get it, and that's why this isn't working. Once they get it, if they got it, the world should be this way. People should be doing this. If you're ever thinking should, or they just don't get it, you're not actually being harshly empirical with yourself. Yeah. Right. And so I don't say data driven, but I say like empirical, because it's like normative versus positive versus empirical, right? A lot of people start a company because they have a normative desire. They want something, they feel like something should be the case, But great entrepreneurs let that all go. They're like, I just want to understand what is the case, what is actually happening, and what are the outcomes of the things that we create. And that's it. And I'm willing to go back to the drawing board and say that whatever I did was bad because because empirically I didn't get what I wanted.
That's a fascinating point. And then is that leading to the ability to ask tons of questions? Like what are the outputs from that? Is it like just constantly saying, I'm going to ask question after question after question, always and everywhere in all things in life?
It's definitely asking questions like, what's the next thing I can do? I think that the questions are definitely part of it. At the same time, I think the output is that you're extraordinarily honest with where the business is and where it is not and how it's going. And you're never fooling yourself with what is working and what is not working. And I think that's the thing that, again, being empirical and creative, because it's okay. Like if you know that you're going to come up with the next idea, if you're super honest with yourself that it's not working the way that it's currently going, that feels fine. But if you're not confident that you're going to find the next creative solution, maybe it doesn't feel fine. And maybe that's why a lot of entrepreneurs, kind of get themselves into this cycle where they're just trying to make the same thing work again and again and again, and not actually honestly facing the empirical reality, because they're not necessarily confident that their next creative solution is going to be there at their fingertips.
Isn't there some argument though that like part of it is just being like a hard-headed and just continue like pushing forward even if the evidence says the opposite, because maybe the market hasn't fully caught up to you yet, you haven't built quite the right product. Like there's lots of excuses people might give, and they're probably good examples of that to some extent, where it might take many years for you to get to the point where your business really takes off. So what would be your answer to that?
I'm just going to give you an empirical example. So we knew when we started WaveFound, we started this a year ago, and it was going to be a management platform for AI agents. Where were AI agents a year ago? Nowhere, right? Only the top research labs were even talking about AI agents, right? There were a few papers that had come out of Stanford that were on archive around AI agents. And my co-founder and I, we looked at these papers and we were like, oh my God, this is going to be the future. And somebody's going to have to manage all these agents because there's going to be like dozens or hundreds of them in every organization. And we knew we were like way too early. We didn't know how early, right? So instead of being hard-headed, we were like, okay, so how do we get people from here to there?
So like the Mark Bettyhoff warm embrace.
Exactly. And so we're like, okay, how about if we create a no-code agent builder? Because first, we have to make it easy for people to build these agents. Right now, it's really hard. There are Python libraries, and you have to download them through an IDE and all this. Let's do that first. So we did that first. And then let's give them a little glimpse of this manager thing that we have. And so we started talking about that, and that's how, and then we started getting signal around showing people, organizations with lots of agents and getting them to open their eyes about well, what does it mean to have many agents in an organization? What are you going to need? And then we start gathering data from them about what are the first questions that they start asking when they see an organization with 19 agents, like our organization, like our company. We always demo our own org, by the way, because, it's... So then we start getting that data, and then we start building those features into the manager first, because we know that those are the first questions that customers ask when they see an organization with 19 agents. So we're like, okay, let's build those first, because those are the first things they're asking about.
Yep.
And then let's build a few leading things that they may not be asking about, but we know that, and then let's see how they respond. And then sometimes they don't respond well. We pull those things out of the product. We'll ship them later. Right? But sometimes they respond well. And so we keep those in the product. So it's that kind of, it's not being hard-headed. It's getting the signal about whether your vision is lining up with reality. And honestly, we raised at a time when almost every VC I talked to said, we don't know how quickly AI agents are actually going to be adopted in enterprises. And we don't know if it's just going to be, one customer service agent and maybe one sales agent, and they're going to be functionally managed. And again, there was so little conviction at the time. This was in the spring. And again, like within the last month, it was like the world has caught up to our thesis that we had a year ago. And we didn't get there by being hard-headed. We got there by like sensing the market and like just meeting customers where they were and meeting them where they were. And now we're ready to finally like start building the thing that we really thought about a year ago.
So one last question along these lines, and I want to come back to your history in terms of how you got to where you are today. But what about like the founder who would also say to some of these points, like having a reality distortion field is actually really powerful. I mean, there's plenty of good examples of this. Where is a reality distortion field compared to let's go get things done and take care of things, right? There's lots of good examples, right? Elon Musk certainly has a reality distortion field in a big way, in a very strong personality, but he's like, we're going to Mars, and he has this massive vision. Or there's going to be electric cars is like the future for all transportation. Steve Jobs certainly was very famous in these things, but yet they also shipped amazing world-class products. So how as an entrepreneur, what level of those two things should you have?
So funny story about Steve Jobs. For those people who lived in Palo Alto for a long time, I have a lot of friends that Steve Jobs spent a lot of time in the Apple store in downtown Palo Alto. You think that's because he couldn't get you think he was like shopping for Apple products? No, he was observing people. He was starting to trying to understand where people were. That's what I think. I mean, I don't know why he was there, but apparently he spent a lot of time talking to people and kind of watching them play with his products and things like that. And so my sense is that great entrepreneurs understand their customers and feel their customers more deeply than the other people who work in the organization. And the reason they create that what's called like a very strong personality or just like banging the table, you're going to do it my way, is because they got more data from customers than they believe anybody else did. They feel their customers more deeply. They feel society and the culture more deeply, they believe, than anyone else. And they've probably gone through. Why do you think Elon Musk has always spent so much time on Twitter? You think he needs to get his news from Twitter? I think he's always trying to sense where the culture is, where it's going, what's happening, what are people interested in talking about, what are the ideas that are taking off in society, right? That's why I think he spends so much time on Twitter, just like Steve Jobs spends so much time in the Apple store. They have deep conviction that they feel culture and society and customers more deeply than the people that they're working with. And that's why they're so hard-headed.
Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. Okay, so how do you go? So walk me through then, it's kind of a little bit on the topic. Walk me back to the very early days of your career and the ability to consult on what you're feeling and seeing in helping people see it, where you started your first business with your dad. So you graduate college?
I was just graduated high school, actually. It was between high school and college.
Okay. And why was your dad like, of course I'm going to start business with my, 18-year-old daughter?
Well, yes. So what happened was it was the early 1990s and property values dropped. He saw an opportunity for people to redo their property taxes, to get reassessed, right? To get their property values decreased, right? Because the market value had gone down, but very few people knew how to do it. So, he's like, Tatyana, you speak English. He doesn't really speak English. You speak English. You know how to write in English. Why don't you do this? So he taught me how to, do this.
He figured out how to do it by like looking online, things like that. He just was like, I can't be the
not online. Not online. This is manual. 1992, so not online.
Okay, so super manual. Was he always an entrepreneur? Like, is that in your family's blood? Okay.
He is an engineer. Everybody in my family is an engineer. My mother's an engineer. My father's an engineer. My grandmother's an engineer. My aunt's an engineer. My brother's an engineer. Everybody in my family is an engineer, except for me. But so they all love to figure things out. They all figure everything out. And I've always been that way too, to be honest, just not as an engineer. So we all figure everything out like on our own. And so, yeah, he figured this out. Our property, like we got our own for himself, right? We got our own property values, reassessed. And he saved, our family saved like $2,000 a year on our property taxes. He's like, everybody should do this, but nobody else is doing this. This can be a business. Tatyana, you speaking. Oh, by the way, I wrote the letter, right, for him on his behalf. And he's like, you should just write letters for everybody and just charge them 1/2 of their first year savings and you can make a lot of money. And I was going to college. I needed to pay for college,
It's great.
And so, yeah, he's just like, go do this thing. And so I went door to door and I sold my property tax consulting services as an 18-year-old.
Wow. That's crazy.
So, yeah, that was my first business.
How long did you guys do that for? And what was the outcome?
I mean, I went to college, right, in August or whatever. So it was June, July, August, 3 months, made, several $1,000s. Collections were very hard. Some people were like, sure, I'll take your letter, 18-year-old girl, and okay, I'll fill it out and you file it in the, public, in the public records and in the tax assessor's office. And then they would come back. And of course I would check public records and they would get their property. And I'd be like, okay, time to pay me. Collections were very hard. So a lot of people didn't pay, even though their property values went down. That was interesting. But about half paid, so that was still pretty good money for.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, that's a good summer job, basically.
Yeah. That's good amazing. Summer job. Very good, very lucrative summer job. So that was my first business. And then, I worked all through college. Second business after, it was also in between different things. So I worked in advertising for a few years. I was going to go to grad school at UC Berkeley. I was going to take a massive pay cut. And again, there was like this financial, like, oh my God, I have to live on $14,000 a year in Berkeley. Maybe I should go make some money. So I just told people that I was doing brand strategy consulting, and Sony Electronics hired me for,
Wait, how does Sony, a big name company like Sony, decide like we're going to hire this college person to be brand strategy for us?
So my former boss from Leo Burnett was actually one of the folks at Sony. Now he was one of the
impression on him, obviously.
Yeah. So I told him, that I was doing freelance, brand strategy consulting, and he was like, I'll hire you. How much time do you have? So that was, it was kind of like, that wasn't really truly a business because it's very easy to get my main client. But I did get a few other clients as well through, again, my former Leo Burnett networks and people that I'd worked with before or come across before, like small projects. But Sony was the big client. And then again, in between, like when I left AWS, I then started another consulting firm helping mostly startup entrepreneurs, startup founders build their product strategy and also their culture. And I had this culture risk framework that I spoke a lot about, gave a bunch of keynotes on, and then did kind of offsites with founding teams around how to build their company culture. So started that. So a couple of different consulting businesses, but always just me. Right. Like one of my goals was to never have employees, because as soon as I had employees, I would feel responsible for continuing the business. And I just didn't want that responsibility in my life.
Very fair. And obviously you clearly decided to make a change with that in the current business. But before we get to that, walk me through then. Okay. So you started all these consulting firms. Sounds like they were pretty successful, but yet a large majority of your career has spent inside of these big companies, right? I mean, like just to you list off a few of them, but to relist it off for people, I mean, it's like a who's who of like top tier companies, right? So Leo Burnett is a great firm. So a great company there. You spent 7.5 years almost at IDEO. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. We should talk about that because there's just so many great learnings and it's such an amazing name. And I also love to talk about culture, by the way, like what is the right culture for startups and lessons learned on that front. Always important. 2.5 years at Salesforce as a VP for a while, for part of it, and doing IoT and cloud stuff. 2 years at AWS, at Amazon as a general manager, which is, I think, I don't really know titles in Amazon, but pretty big name, and built a team of 150 people in 18 months. Chief product officer of Nextdoor, which is, a fantastic sort of local social network. Got to keep going. Board director and chair of compensation committees for user testing, a fellow at Sapphire Ventures, SVP of product and general manager, and then advisor for Pendo, which is a very late stage, very successful startup as well, and a ton of other advising and other things like that, board of directors that you've done too. So you've kept yourself pretty busy. And then of course, a mother of 2 wonderful children on top of it. So, you somehow you find the time for all of it. What's the secret?
Well, I mean, the secret is my personality. Like I think a lot of us, honestly, entrepreneurs are kind of ADD, right? Like we have we're spinning up things like all the time. Like I spin up things all the time, and I can't stop. And so, yeah, I don't know. I've always been this way. I've always done 1,000 things all the time. And so for me, I couldn't be any other way, I would say. And I'm also very impatient. I think that's another personality trait of great entrepreneurs. We're very impatient, which gets us in trouble in large companies. And that's actually why I have very short tenures at most companies, is because I'm very impatient. I get things done very quickly. I break a lot of glass. And then when people tell me to take it down a notch, I'm just like, I can't, I'm out. I gotta go.
So I found something very similar when I worked at Twitter for a while, was the same sort of thing, but it was very frustrating, and maybe you probably feel the same way, in the sense that I'm like, but we should be moving so much faster. Like we can move faster as a team, and then people be like, but you're breaking too much glass. And to me, those two just didn't make any sense. Like, but don't you want to move faster? That gets better shareholder returns.
But here's the thing though. I'm just empirically, again, I don't really care what people should or shouldn't be doing. I just cannot move. I'm frustrated, right? And so to get out of my frustration, I just move fast. And I'm told all the time, hey, it'll be better for your career if you just focus on your relationships, focus on the politics. Tatyana, I'm trying to help you by telling you that there are some political things that you're not seeing. And I'm like, no, I see them. I just can't do it. I just can't. I will not be happy. And, and so I just plow through, make things happen. And then, when things, ultimately start getting too much resistance and I can't keep moving anymore, empirically, I just say I can't keep moving as fast as I need to. I am unhappy. This is not going to work out. And so I don't try to change, organizations aren't going to change. They're just not, unless the CEO wants it to change. So we shouldn't try to change them. We should just do whatever we can do and maintain our joy. And then as soon as we can't maintain our joy, we should go. Goodbye.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Easier said than done for a lot of people, because people, of course, are very scared about that and scared of things. But I obviously totally agree. Life is too short to just stick around in a job either you don't like or that's not bringing you joy. If you're talented, you'll find something else no matter what. But here's the thing. What are you afraid of? I'm afraid of being unhappy. Yeah.
I'm afraid of losing my joy. That's my greatest fear.
That should be everyone's greatest fear. That is a great point. And so on that note, how did, I seem like it's a little bit of an indictment of, Amazon and Salesforce and these companies where you didn't stay for all that long, because I'm sure they would say that they are, Jeff Bezos, I think, still says it's day zero or whatever at Amazon, and they're still entrepreneurial. And I'm sure Mark Benioff would say the same thing. And I'm sure you've been at user testing in Nextdoor. We're a startup. And I remember my first company that I worked for in Silicon Valley, we got acquired by Symantec. And I remember Symantec coming in and be like, we are super entrepreneurial. We are still an entrepreneurial company. We're not going to destroy this entrepreneurial culture of the company that we're acquiring. Within 18 months, everyone was gone from that company because they're Symantec moves so slow and they're definitely not entrepreneurial. That CEO, by the way, who also did the acquisition, was also gone from Symantec shortly thereafter too. Not because of our deal, but so what is it about these organizations that claim they are this way and maybe and can't embrace someone like you?
So this goes to my culture risk framework. So the thing that every organization is fighting against are these five, what I call these five culture risks that happen. And and the main one that every company finds is scaling risk. As organizations scale, and we know this, right? That it is impossible to maintain a startup culture when you're over 140 people. And that is kind of Dunbar's number, right? 140, 150 people.
Yep.
Because the way in which we interact with each other as human beings, this is deeply wired inside us, fundamentally changes because we go from knowing exactly who the other people are that we're working with and being able to kind of like make these all kinds of shortcuts based on people's personalities and what we know they enjoy and what they're good at, to needing to abide by roles and titles and functions and OKRs and all these coordination systems and that we need to set up in order to structure larger organizations. So it's literally impossible. This is why Jeff Bezos had the two-pizza team thing, but you can't, I mean, Amazon is not really two pizza teams, right? I mean, our team was 150 people. Like when you get to a certain scale and you have enterprise customers that are a certain scale, you just need to operate at scale. You need to operate as a large company. You have to set up the same organization structures, right? As big companies do. And that it's not anybody's fault. It's just kind of inevitable. And Amazon had stayed it off for a long time and longer than most other companies are able to. But it's still, it's still really hard.
And because of that, like when it gets that big, just inevitably politics come into play a little bit more, and it's a bit more of a relationship thing. So therefore, it's hard for people who are entrepreneurial to survive. So Bob Sutton, who is a professor at Stanford, he says just the care and feeding of managing large organizations, just more of your time goes into kind of caring and feeding for the organization as an organization, as opposed to just like going down and having like very specific goals. And then as you create like different functions and different teams, and those different teams have different goals, those goals are not necessarily aligned. Alignment becomes a lot harder. And so then there becomes a lot more negotiation. So, company politics are really about people's goals are somewhat not unaligned or somewhat in tension. And then also people's career, once you start building career ladders, then you got a whole other level of incentives that people are optimizing for. So you're not all optimizing for the same goal. You're not all optimized, and you have to negotiate these different overlapping, intersecting, and sometimes conflicting goals. You have to go through much more difficult prioritization processes and the ability to communicate the priorities, align on the priorities, get everybody to buy in on the same set of priorities. All of that stuff just becomes more difficult as you scale. And so that's one piece of being a large company. I mean, I think the other piece is, you have to be responsible not just for building the new thing, but you're even more responsible for maintaining the thing that you've already built, right? And that maintenance part takes over more and more and more of the time and the effort and the resources of the larger, more mature organization. And that's just reality as well. So then how do companies, how do startups and entrepreneurs build a culture that can stave that off and grow in the right way to achieve hopefully long-term, long-lasting success and maybe avoid as much of that sort of cruft or whatever that builds up as you grow? What are the ways to do that? Like how are you setting up the culture right now for your own company, and how should founders be thinking of that right off the bat?
Well, the good news is that when you're under 30 people, you don't need to do much, to be honest. I mean, you need to like make sure it's not toxic or nobody's getting harassed or you're not doing anything like that.
But isn't also the sorry to interrupt you, but like isn't also the personality and culture of a company, even if you don't have to do a lot, it comes directly from the founders themselves.
That's right. That's why I'm saying you don't have to do a lot, right? Yeah.
So hopefully you as a founder, though, have some idea of what the culture is you want to create or the company you want to build and can espouse that or live it on a regular basis because you're showcasing it every day by your actions.
So when you're under 30, I completely agree with you. You just said it all, which is when you're under 30 people, the culture is set by the CEO through mimicry. It actually doesn't matter what you say. That this is why you don't have to do a lot. You can say whatever you want to say about your company culture. It doesn't matter. All that matters is what you do. Right? Mm-hmm. And people will watch what you do and they will respond to what you do. So if you don't work late, nobody else is going to work late. Like just assume, right, that you're going to set the tone and the tenor for how everyone else is going to behave. And you have to consciously do those things, right? And you have to consciously, understand, right? What are your behaviors communicating to other people about what this company culture is? And a lot of that is done completely unconsciously. So my definition of culture is the conditions that set up how people could behave, right? And so the best example of that is there's a bridge between Singapore and Malaysia. And when people drive on the Singapore part side of the bridge, right? When they drive in Singapore, everybody follows the rules. Everybody drives in a very orderly way. Nobody honks the horn, right? The same person in the same car drives over the bridge into Malaysia and they start swerving and driving like a maniac and people are honking their horns, right? It's the same people in the same cars. That's culture, right? It's not like they're reading the signs and like trying to follow the laws. It's they sense that everybody around them is doing something else and they kind of take on that new behavior. So that's that. And you have to be very aware of how you as the CEO, the founder, are setting that up. Nobody is behaving in your organization by accident, probably. There are probably some exceptions on that, but they're mimicking you. You're the first driver on that road in Malaysia. So
is there a type of cultural element or aspect that founders should try to have? Like, I'm sure some of it just comes from who you are as an individual, but are there certain elements that you're like, the best founders do this? Like, the ones we talked about, like the companies who are Jeff Bezos, Mark Benioff, are there certain elements that they bring to the table? They're like, I want to emulate that because they set the tone so well that is this type of tone I want to set for my company or the companies I invest in or advise.
Are we going to talk about founder mode now?
We can. we definitely can. And it was coming, but like, yeah, I mean, like, are there certain things like what is the founder mode?
Yes. So
that we should all do if we want.
So I think the reason I mentioned that is because I think this gets into the founder mode conversation, right? What is that thing? So part of it is that I think that, again, it's being conscious about what are the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve as an organization and what are the things that I'm doing and how does that get us to those outcomes and how does it not? And this is actually why some of the best founders are kind of harsh and a little bit unpredictable, right? Because sometimes they're really nice and really human. And sometimes they're like, they kind of flip the table over and, kind of really harsh to people. And I believe that the best founders are pretty conscious and aware of what they're doing and why they're behaving the way that they are, regardless of whether it seems to the outside world unpredictable or a little, again, never cross the line in terms of being really abusive or harassing or anything like that. But you're seeing something where the organization is behaving in a way that's like too complacent, right? And I think, I don't know, but I think that the best founders are then like, I'm going to flip the table over and I'm going to get people out of their complacency in the most, like shock works, right? Like when people are like, oh my gosh, I thought he was like so laid back and I thought everything was going okay. And again, if you keep doing what you've been doing, if you keep being the nice guy who's like, okay, please consider do something else, like it's not working, you need to make an intervention to change it. And sometimes that's doing something like throwing something across the room, right? I have not personally done that yet, but I reserve the right to do it if I need to.
Give it some time. But are there other elements too that like, you're like, okay, these are the things that these great entrepreneurs bring to the table? I mean, it's like, certainly it's well known. Jeff Bezos certainly was like a hardcore workaholic. Elon Musk clearly like basically doesn't sleep. I mean, I've actually heard that about Mark Benioff. I mean, I'm sure he's a really hard worker, but I haven't heard that he's got just keeps insane hours and never sleeps. He seems more balanced, at least on paper. I mean, like, are there certain things, once again, like you as an entrepreneur today are trying to emulate culturally?
Well, so first of all, as a early stage startup founder, I've found it's very hard to sleep.
For sure.
It's very hard to sleep well.
There's a lot of things going on in your mind.
It just is like your brain is constantly going, and it's going in the middle of the night, and you kind of can't turn it off. And anyway, I do not enjoy that part of being a startup.
And you're stressed, like, what else is going to break tomorrow? What else is not going right? All those things.
You're replaying, right? Customer conversations. You're creating to-do lists in your head all the time. Anyway, but so I doubt that there is a well-sleeping, successful startup founder. I have serious questions about that. But I do think that there are, again, the self-awareness, like if you are not self-aware about what you're doing, that's probably not a great sign. If you're self-aware about what you're doing and why and what you're trying to impact by doing that, that's probably a pretty good sign that you're a good, entrepreneur, that you're a good leader. Because this is what I also believe. I do not believe that people like working for leaders who are nice. I think people like working for leaders who will get their team to win.
Yep. I agree. So what does that mean? Like, what does that look like?
Winning solves a lot of things. Again, don't be like horrible, right? Or like illegal. Don't do that. But winning solves a lot of things, and winning excuses a lot of things, right? In terms of just like the niceness versus not nice.
The story certainly of Elon Musk at Tesla, when Tesla was doing the Model 3, I have plenty of people who would say, I would never go work there. Elon's insane. No one's sleeping. It's crazy. I'm like, you know what? But I know people who work there who say that was the best time of their entire careers. Like they were, as a whole team, working together on this massive project. And yeah, they weren't sleeping, and it was a really tough environment. And if they messed up, they were yelled at by the CEO, but they loved it.
My favorite teacher in high school was my drama teacher, who's also an English teacher. But I was a big theater person. I was the president of the drama club. But like we won every theater contest we ever entered. We won them all. And this guy, he would literally pick up a script and he would throw it across the room and just like curse at me for like 15 minutes. And again, I'm a 15-year-old girl. He's like a 60-year-old man.
I feel like that might not be allowed even today or something. You never know in today's world. But.
He was my favorite teacher because he was passionate. He cared. I felt like he really saw me. I did my best work with him. And then we always won.
Yeah.
So it was, I would take that trade-off of being yelled at and having things like thrown at me, not at me, but like close to me. I would take that trade-off any day of the week.
How do you then coach that mindset, right? So I'll even like use myself as an example, right? I think I'm decent at that stuff, and I try to call people out and give them examples, but I'm not sure if I'm really giving them the right coaching to get to that next level. Like they hear me and like, you're not doing good enough. Here are the reasons why. This can be done better. We should be closer to winning. And not that much changes. So what approach, or how do you bring to the table when you manage these teams of 150 plus people, or even now for you at the startup, like how do you bring that to the table in the right way? Like I'm very passionate about what we're doing at my company, but I don't know. I don't know if I have like the asshole enough bone to do this the right way. And I worry about that for myself, is that even as a 4-time entrepreneur, like, am I hardcore enough to do this right? How do you summon that as a founder?
Again, I think you have to care about the outcomes more than you care about anything else.
Yeah,
so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, I think you have to be very realistic about what every person is capable of, and you need to push them to the limit. So what I say I do with the people who work for me is I push them through the wall, right? Like, whatever you think your wall is in terms of your capability, I'm going to push you through the wall, and I'm going to see where you stop. And if I think you can go a lot further than where you think your wall is, it's going to get really uncomfortable for you. But you're going to love working for me. Yeah. And you're going to want to work for me again, right?
So is that just setting like really aggressive targets and goals and things like that? Is that like this simple heuristic for that? What does that look like?
It's telling people, tactically, this is what I do. I'm like, I think you're capable of something that you don't think you're capable of. So you're going to tell me all the reasons why you can't get it done by a certain day, or why this is going to be really hard to do. And I'm going to tell you, this is your goal, and I want zero excuses, and I need this done. And I know, and you may not think you can do it. I know you can do it, but this is it. And if we're done talking, I don't want to hear excuses. Get it done.
Yeah. We love that. And it's great. Simple.
And most people get it done. And if they don't, and they come back to me with an excuse, I'm like, oh, your wall is a lot closer than I thought it was.
Does that mean you readjust your expectations, or do you let them go?
I mean, they're certainly not going to grow as far and as fast with me. Yep. But if I'm going to, again, like the whole thing, I'm going to push you through the wall. You have a story in your mind of what you are and are not capable of. And I'm going to push you through that wall. And if I can't push you through that wall, we're probably not going to work together very well. And we're probably not going to work together for very long.
And then how does that work? How do you train that through your team? So when you had 150 people at Amazon, did you train people to be good at pushing the rest of the people? Because you can't do that one-on-one with everybody.
No.
So how did you train that in your managers, and how? And the question this really is about is delegation. Like, how do you delegate the proper way to still keep an entire organization moving?
So at Amazon, I directly managed. So we grew from 2 to 150, but then I helped hire some folks who were my peers. So I managed directly 50 people. So there are some people, even if they're ICs, no matter how I can sense when I can push people really, really far, when people can get pushed really far. So there was one guy, I hope it's okay that I say his name, Anthony Bello. He was one of my interns at Salesforce, and he was an engineering intern. And again, I saw that guy, and he was an intern in college, and I was like, I can push this guy really far. And so then he came to work for me at Amazon because he remembered that. And again, he was right out of college, right? And again, I'm like, I'm going to push this guy as far as I can. And I gave him massive engineering design projects. So the first thing is you have to identify who are the people that can be pushed really, really far.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what their title is or what their age is or anything like that. You can just kind of like sense, right? Like you can sense that this person, it's like the high potential thing, right? You can sense when somebody's high potential.
Yep.
And then you just start pushing them, and you start doing things that feel completely irrational, right? And I had another person straight out of business school at IDEO, Eric. And I was like, Eric, I'm selling a project. It's a really big project. I need you to lead the project. He's like, oh, I've never led a project. I don't know if I can do it. I'm like, Eric, you're leading this project. You're going to knock it out of the ballpark. And you're going to do this. And he was like, I don't know. Again, it was like lots of excuses, lots of stories, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I zero excuses. I'm not interested in your excuses. You're doing this. And he was awesome. Again, so you just have to sense, who's ready to be pushed. And then you just push them hard. And then you just keep going. And then you see where they stop.
And I assume part of that sensing is making sure if there's someone who can be pushed, they're not going to burn out, because that's always a risk with the wrong person, is you push them so far, they throw up their hands and surrender and need to leave.
I've never had that happen.
All right. That's actually great to know too.
Most people who burn out are actually functioning below their potential.
Yes, I would agree. That's actually a great point too. And okay, so
if you keep pushing people to their potential, they will not burn out because they'll be really happy. People who are happy don't burn out. Only unhappy people burn out. This is the other thing. If you wake up every morning and you're like, I can't wait to go to work, you're not going to burn out.
Christ.
I don't care if you're working 20 hours. I can't tell you how many people are working 20 hours a week and they think they're burned out.
No.
Just because they're not happy. They're not waking up with joy.
Yeah. And that's also about culture and what you're building and getting people involved. When you think through different hats you have to wear as a founder, do you have to switch those around a lot? Like, how are you switching, going from sales to product to engineering to customer support to fundraising? What do you do? How do you do that well? Essentially context switching.
I mean, I don't know if I do it well. You'd have to ask other people if I do it well. But I mean, I think naturally those of us who are entrepreneurs have that natural proclivity. Again, it's the part of the ADD that we are naturally curious and we hate doing the same thing for a very long period of time. It feels unnatural to stay in a lane. And it feels very natural to go between different functions and different opinions and different ideas and to dive deep into lots of different, topics. And if that's not your proclivity, you're probably not going to enjoy being a founder CEO very much, I think.
Yeah, no, fair point. So I wanted to use that as an entree into the next sort of question, which is something you know really well, which is let's spend a little bit of time talking about the future of the world and the agentic future that we're in. So on that note, how can I just start handing all of these different tasks and roles that I have to do as a founder to my AI agents? How close is that? How far away are we? What does it end up looking like? And obviously, maybe make it really specific. What does that mean for a startup? Like when is it? Do you get to a point where you're saying, I can start handing a lot of things to my AI agents, who you've, I think, lovingly termed as essentially interns? I don't feel comfortable handing a lot of things to interns, and I actually tell startups, don't hire interns. They're more trouble than they're worth. They seem cheap, but they're more trouble than they're worth. So why are agents better? And when should I be thinking of using agents today? And then what does that even mean given the pace of change of this market in the next 12 to 24 months or further into the future?
Yeah. So the current capability of most AI agent or most LLM models is at the level of an intern, right? Like a college grad. That's what Sam Altman is saying. And I agree with him. So that's why we called it an intern. The upside of AI agent interns is that they're not going to be asking to be trained or get mentoring or, asking for a job afterwards or all of that kind of stuff. And there are no laws around what you need to do and how much you need to pay interns.
Not yet.
But anyway.
I'm waiting for the world where we do have laws around our AIs have, rights, but that's probably coming sometime too. But anyways, digress.
We can talk about that too. But the reality is, so at WaveFound, we have 6 employees currently and 19 AI agents. And those AI agents do a number of different things.
So do you tell people then, is your company 25 teammates?
No. When people ask how big is your company, I say 6 humans and 19 AI agents.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not quite at the level of even being worth half a teammate in a sense.
Well, I mean, nobody will understand if I say 25 teammates, what that means. So, so that's why I say it that way. But the other thing is each AI agent is doing a part of a job. So I have one AI agent doing synthesizing all of our customer calls, right? That's our customer discovery agent. And I have another AI agent sort of managing the product roadmap and answering questions about the product roadmap. And so they're doing maybe together 30% of a product manager's job. But if I actually hired a product manager, they would be doing a lot more. So one AI agent, again, it's an intern that can only do a piece of a job usually versus the full job. That's the other way to think about it. And so we're always trying to find ways of, enhancing our organization. So our investor updates always come with an AI agent. So
what does that mean? They come with an AI agent?
the AI agent knows a lot about our product strategy, our
I mean, like it's
roadmap, our
a Q&A
financial.
agent chatbot. Be like, hey,
Yeah,
here's
so
our
like,
update. Ask any questions that you want to go. If you want to go deeper in any of these topics, ask the questions.
exactly. Because our investors, they just want to read the highlights.
Yep.
Right. But we might want to give them the opportunity to dive in. Here's an AI agent, right? With every investor update. So, and then we track who actually, who asked what of the AI
what percentage
agent.
of your investors even ask a question? I found, so I'll tell you one example of that. A few of the companies I'm invested in, they send updates, of course. And then at the very end of it, they have like hey, click here to get some swag from the company. I've had a number of companies tell me I'm the only person that has ever gotten to the bottom and actually submitted something for it. Because I guess I'm a glutton for like random company swag, which is like, I have so much dead company swag now. I could like make a museum of dead companies. But I was shocked that I was like the only one who ever did that. And I think mostly they said it was because no one got to the bottom and actually commented. Maybe
I bet you the open rates are pretty low just in general, but
it's so crazy. I don't get it. You can learn from these companies. Anyways, continue. Sorry, keep interrupting you.
So I mean, so, no, we actually did get some questions from our last investor update. And so I think some of them were just trying out the AI agent, but good for them for even seeing that we had one, right? So we do stuff like that. Our lead gen agent on our website is extraordinarily helpful. It answers a lot of questions. Like a lot of investors come in through that and will actually contact us and say like, oh my God, your AI agent like works really well on your website. Like,
and is your agent trained on like, how do you train it on your internal data or knowledge base or whatever, but without it giving up proprietary data to some random person asking it public questions?
So every AI agent, like we have 19 agents, right? So each one has a different level of knowledge or information that it has access to. And then anytime we connect them, we actually have a way to configure the collaboration. So what they can and can't ask each other about or tell each other about. Oh, wow. So there's layers of controls, but again, remember that it's all probabilistic technology. So if you really don't want something going out, like just create another AI agent and don't tell it that information. The rules-based logic doesn't work 100% of the time with these, LLM-based systems. So that's why we have so many agents, because some of them do basically the same things, but with different levels of permissions, right?
So how much, if you think you have these 19 agents, is that the equivalent of like, have you saved cash on hiring another 3 full-time people or something? And so 2. So then what does that equal? How will that continue to change in the future? Like, do you think you will even you'll double the number of AI agents and that's another 2 people you're saved? Or because the agents get better and better, that's like 3 or 4 people that you've saved on hiring?
So, well, I think that the agents will get better and better. So we will, as you scale, right, you need to hire on new functions, right? So instead of like, eventually we'll have to hire a marketing person, even though almost all of our marketing stuff and everything that we're putting together right now is through the help, right, of an AI agent. Eventually we'll have to hire some sort of sales person, but like right now, all of our sales communication is done through an AI agent.
Is that like literally like you send the AA agent sending the email, finding the target, sending the email?
No, we don't do any
interview for the.
We don't do any outbound. Okay. All of our we only do marketing and inbound, or we don't actually have a marketing, but we do stuff like this. We do talks and tell people, and then we get inbound. The AI agent on our website does a great job at handling our inbound, figuring out how to send people in different ways, whether they should get a demo or whether they should give us their email. And then asking, like, basically based on what it says, it's connected to our HubSpot, and then it'll put it into either a lead or a nurture campaign or a high priority lead. So again, we haven't had to hire an SDR, and we're getting a lot of great outcomes with our AI agent on our website. So, I don't really see any need to hire an SDR anytime soon. Yep. So it's just, we're playing it by ear in terms of what can we do with our own technology and when do we need to hire people.
Yep. And so where does this go for the future? So So, okay, this is where you are today. You've saved at least two full-time hires right now because of your AI agents. What does this look like in 12, 24 months? Not just for you guys, but for every startup and then in arguably every business. Like, how is this changing society? I mean, I have very mixed emotions about what is going to happen to humanity in the next sort of 10 years environmentally, but also AI wise and everything else. But also it can lead to a really interesting, probably really bright, optimistic future, an abundant future.
Yes.
Where do you see that as someone who's living this every single day? And how do startups and businesses adopt this technology in a thoughtful way to improve the outcomes for every stakeholder, their teams and their clients and customers?
Yeah. So the capabilities of AI will continue to increase. I absolutely anticipate that. I mean, so a lot of people are saying things that are a little bit disingenuous, which is you're not going to lose your job to an AI, you're going to lose your job to a human using AI. That's kind of like saying if you were in 1900, you're not going to lose, if you're a farmer, you're not going to lose your job to a tractor, you're going to lose your job to a farmer using a tractor. Okay, but like for every farmer using a tractor, there's like 90 farmers that no longer had a job. So like the same kind of thing is going to happen. So I do think that a lot of our desk-based jobs, anytime you're clicking on a keyboard and doing stuff as the main thing that you're doing in your job, there's going to be a lot fewer humans needed for those functions. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that humans are going to be freed up to fully use our creative resources and our powers that we have probably even forgotten that we have because we've been in front of keyboards and computers for so long doing the same type of really kind of dumb, repetitive work. Like, how awesome is it to be a customer service agent, human agent? Not awesome, right? That's not an awesome job. And the fact that people are now going to be able to do other things for other humans that may be more interesting, more inspiring, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, I think if people just aren't so attached to doing the same things that they've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years, that they will not feel so much angst, anxiety about this moment. Humans have lived through massive technological disruptions, and we will again. The worst thing we can do is tell people that we're just going to give you a check, so don't worry about it. That does not drive. People never feel good about themselves if they're just collecting a check for doing nothing. For anybody who doesn't believe me, I suggest that you watch the Pixar movie WALL-E again. Okay? Like the beginning of the movie is literally the UBI utopia, right? Where people are like fat, happy, sipping on their Slurpees, like watching some stupid social media, something, Netflix, something in front of their screens. And when they're happy, when they're happy, they land on planet Earth and they have to grow their own food and they have to walk on their own. That's when humans are happy. And the more that we find that we are creative, adaptable as human beings, that is when we're going to discover our joy. And don't worry about the current jobs that you have going away. Just open up your mind up to all the possibilities of what you can possibly do, because your capacities are far greater than you even know.
Yeah, that is, I almost want to end things right there, given that was so strong. But on that note, kind of a stronger way to end it even is, what is the advice then that you give to your kids today, right? So they're getting older. What is your advice? What do you study in school? How do you prepare for that future as an individual? And then what does that mean related to that? And the other kind of way I would love to end this and just get your take on it is, what does that mean for all of us as entrepreneurs, individuals? Like, how do you curate a life that brings you joy and happiness given the changes that are occurring? So kind of two-part question.
Well, so the first one is that I just encourage them. I definitely encourage them to do well in school, because I think achievement is a big part of it. Be proud of yourself. Achieve in a way that you are proud every time you show up in school. So that's the first thing. Like, figure out what achievement looks like for you. The second one is find out what brings you joy when you do it and do more of that, whatever it is. And the third is just remember that you're super adaptable. And now in terms of like, okay, now what does this really mean? So in 2020, in the winter of 2022, I'd registered my 2 kids into coding camp for the following summer for 2023. And then ChatGPT came out and I was playing with it and I said, fuck it, girls, you're never going to need to code. And I put them in sailing camp instead and public speaking. I did sailing and public speaking camp instead. So why public speaking? Well, I think the ability to communicate energetically through your words, through your body language is still something that humans are going to like. I see these robots, they can do, they can serve, drinks really well. There's like bartending robots now, right? That like,
yeah,
that are pretty good, but they can't communicate, right? They still can't look in the eyes, right, of somebody at the bar and say, hey, looks like you had a hard day. Can I get you a drink? Right. So
I don't see that being all that far away though. I can imagine very quickly, like you take some eyes, you combine it with ChatGPT and like suddenly it's having a very personalized conversation with you and reading your body language with just basic eye cameras.
Maybe, but there's still that energy, right, that you get when you connect with somebody, right? So the first one is public speaking and then sailing. So there's so much bodily knowledge that I think that we've lost. So think about the fact that human beings, used to sail vast oceans tens of thousands of years ago with no instruments at all. And none of us could probably do it today. There is something that we've lost in that bodily knowledge that I don't know what it is. I don't have it, but I want my kids to start to figure out how to trigger that within themselves. So I think something happens on the sailboat that is about sensing the ocean, feeling the wind, feeling like this larger vastness of nature that we used to be able to do as human beings, but we've completely lost it. So how do we rekindle that? And how do we bring that capacity back out? Because I don't think robots and AI are going to be able to necessarily do that very soon. So I don't know. I mean, and then it's like, stay open to all of the wonders and mysteries of what the future holds.
Do you give yourself similar advice as a founder? Like what do you do to try to take your mind off some of these things?
I am very deeply involved in spiritual practices. So I've been doing yoga and teaching yoga for over 25 years. But recently, I've also become a Reiki master. I have been doing past life regressions, which are amazing because when you recognize that this life is just one point on this massive journey, you're less attached to the outcomes of what is happening. It's a lot easier to be joyful because you're like, next stop, it's okay. And so, I've been doing a lot of these things that just really help expand my awareness about the mysteries of the universe and help me understand also that there's so much that we don't know. I saw Deepak Chopra recently, and he said something like the known universe is a tiny, tiny fraction of what actually exists. And then the visible known universe is even smaller. So we have no idea what we don't know. And the more that we stay open to that, and I create practices for myself that really help me remember that what we see and what we know and all of the problems in this lifetime are so tiny compared to the whole universe.
Yeah, that's an amazing way to maybe end things. So my last question that I have to ask every time, although it was such a strong ending, but my last question that I have to ask every time is if there's a single piece of advice that you could give to every entrepreneur or budding entrepreneur out there, just one piece of advice, what would it be?
Check in with yourself about whether you're kindling your joy every day.
Love that. Tatyana, how can people find you if they want to get in touch, if they want to learn about what you're doing at Wayfound, or if they want to figure out how can they kindle their own joy and learn from some of the practices that you put in place with your joy and amazing experiences? How can they find you?
If you want to find out more about Wayfound, Wayfound.ai, chat with our agent. It'll probably connect you with me eventually. And then LinkedIn is a great way to find me. I'm the only T Mamut out there on the interweb, so I'm very easy to find.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I sincerely appreciate your time, energy, and lessons learned.
Thank you so much.